A simple DNA test, taken as a joke, uncovered a dark secret that shook two sisters to their core and exposed either a devastating mistake or something far more sinister. A baby swap, a negligent hospital, and a mystery beyond imagination. What would you do if your very identity was at stake? Stay with us as we reveal a story of secrets, betrayal, and an unexpected fight for justice. It was a night of celebration at the Anderson family home. The lights sparkled, laughter echoed through the living room, and everything seemed perfect. Zoe and Mia, the twin sisters who were the center of attention, were celebrating their graduation. The table was filled with treats, guests chatted happily, and the girls' parents beamed with pride. In the middle of the party, the girls' mother handed them an envelope. Inside were the results of a DNA test the sisters had taken just for fun. They had sent their samples a few months earlier, curious about their ancestry and excited to learn the origins of their unique traits. It was meant to be a playful activity to share with the family on their special night. Zoe and Mia opened their envelopes eagerly. They began reading their results, laughing at the unexpected nationalities that popped up. But suddenly, something strange happened. Zoe furrowed her brow. There was something in Mia's results that didn't appear in hers. She stopped laughing and grabbed the paper from her sister's hands to compare. What she saw made her freeze. "This doesn't make sense," Zoe said, looking directly at their parents. "What's going on here?" The entire room fell silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing to watch Zoe's face, now filled with confusion and anger. She held the papers as if they were a bomb about to go off. Mia tried to calm her sister. "It must be a mistake, Zoe. These DNA tests aren't always accurate. Maybe they mixed up our results with someone else's." But Zoe wasn't having it. She turned to their parents, tears welling in her eyes, and demanded, "What are you hiding from us?" The parents, just as confused as the girls, tried to make sense of the situation. "This has to be a mistake, Zoe. You're our daughters. We were there when you were born," their father said, trying to reassure them. But the tension in the room only grew. Zoe couldn't hold back. "Then how do you explain this?" she shouted. "The papers say Mia and I were not even related." Shock washed over everyone. Guests began murmuring, and the party, once filled with joy, turned into a scene of doubt and worry. Despite their parents' insistence that it was impossible and a mistake in the results, the weight of the revelation lingered in the air. The celebration continued, but the two sisters could barely muster a smile. Something was off, and deep down, both knew they needed to uncover the truth. That night, while everyone slept, Mia couldn't shake the unease in her chest. She went to Zoe's room and found her sister awake, staring at the results again. With a look of mutual understanding, they knew they couldn't leave this unanswered. "We need to figure this out," Mia said, holding her sister's hand. "No matter what it is, we'll face it together." And so, unaware of what lay ahead, the sisters embarked on a journey that would change their lives forever. After that tense and uncertain night, Zoe and Mia knew they couldn't just let it go. The next day, still unsettled by the test results, they talked and decided they needed answers. Something was wrong, and the only way to understand what had really happened was to seek help from someone they trusted, their family doctor. Dr. Pon was a kind and experienced physician who had cared for the girls since they were little. He had been there for every checkup, vaccination, and scraped knee. If anyone could help them, it was him. Without telling their parents, Zoe and Mia scheduled an appointment. Since they were of age, they didn't need parental permission to take another test. At the clinic, The doctor was surprised to see them arrive together, looking so serious. "What's going on, girls?" he asked, concerned. Zoe took a deep breath and explained, "We did a DNA test as a joke and found out something that doesn't make sense. It says Mia and Io aren't sisters." The doctor furrowed his brow, clearly finding the claim odd. He took the papers they had brought and started reading. At first, he chuckled, thinking it was some kind of prank. "You're trying to pull one over on me, aren't you?" he joked. But when he saw that the sisters weren't laughing and remained serious, his smile disappeared. "All right, this is really strange." Dr. Pond put on his glasses and analyzed the documents more closely. After a few minutes, he looked up and said calmly, "Girls, let's not jump to conclusions. We'll do a full DNA test here at the clinic. That way, we can confirm what these results are saying." Zoe and Mia agreed, though their nervousness was evident. The doctor explained the process in simple terms to help ease their anxiety. He used swabs to collect saliva samples from both and promised they would have the results in a few days. "In the meantime, try not to worry," he said with a reassuring smile. "I'm sure there's a logical explanation for this." But the sisters couldn't relax. Over the next few days, all they could think about was what the results might reveal. Zoe spent hours looking at family photos, searching for any clues that something was amiss. Mia, on the other hand, questioned everything in her mind. What if we aren't really sisters? What does that mean for our family? Finally, the day of the results arrived. When Zoe and Mia walked back into the clinic, they immediately sensed something different. Dr. Pond's usually calm and smiling face was serious. He held an envelope in his hand and seemed hesitant. "Girls, the results are here," he said, placing the envelope on the desk. "And I need you to be prepared for what I'm about to tell you." Their hearts began to race. They weren't ready for what they were about to hear. "According to the test, you two don't share DNA. Zoe and Mia, you're not biological sisters." The world seemed to stop in that moment. Zoe was speechless, while Mia held her breath. They felt a mixture of disbelief and fear. Everything they knew about themselves and their family was now in question. Dr. Pond tried to console them. "I know this is hard to hear, but this doesn't mean your family isn't your family. You grew up together. You're sisters in every way that matters. However, something is clearly wrong, and I suggest you consult a lawyer to better understand the situation." The doctor's words echoed in their minds as they left the clinic. Zoe held Mia's hand and said firmly, "We're going to get to the bottom of this. Whatever it takes, we'll find the truth." A new step, seeking legal help. With the truth about the DNA finally revealed, Zoe and Mia knew they needed help to understand what had really happened. The idea that they might not be biological sisters was unsettling, but even more frightening was the thought that something much bigger was wrong. That's when they decided to contact a lawyer who specialized in family cases and baby swaps. After some research, they found Michael, a lawyer renowned for solving complicated family mysteries. Michael was calm, experienced, and seemed determined to get to the bottom of things. When they first heard his voice on the phone, he said firmly, "We will uncover the truth, no matter what." On the day of the meeting, Zoe and Mia arrived accompanied by their parents, who were still struggling to make sense of everything. Michael's office was small but organized, with shelves lined with folders and documents. As the girls entered, he smiled and shook their hands. "I'm here to help you," he said. Michael began the meeting by asking detailed questions about what had happened so far. He listened attentively as Zoe and Mia explained the DNA test results and how it had shaken their family. Then he turned his attention to the parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, I need to understand everything you can recall about the girls' birth. Do you remember anything unusual when they were born?" The girl's father shook his head. "Nothing, absolutely nothing. We saw both of them born. They were handed to us at the hospital, and we've always believed they were our biological daughters." Michael jotted down notes and then asked, "Do you remember the name of the hospital?" Their mother responded, "Yes, it was St. Mary's Hospital. That's where they were born, on a very busy night." The lawyer paused, then explained, "The next step is to obtain the hospital records. This will help us understand if there was any mistake or swap." But when Michael contacted the hospital, he encountered an unexpected roadblock. The hospital refused to release the records, citing privacy concerns. This resistance made Michael suspicious. "If they have nothing to hide, why not share the records?" he muttered to himself. Unwilling to give up, he filed a legal request to obtain the documents. A few days later, the court ordered the hospital to hand over the records, and that's when Michael uncovered something shocking. "This is very strange," he said, examining the papers. It seems there was another set of twins born the same weekend as Zoe and Mia. He called the family in for an urgent meeting and laid the files on the table. "There are records of 2 African-American twin girls born during the same period as you two. The hospital was extremely overcrowded at the time. There's a possibility something happened with the babies." Zoe and Mia sat in silence, trying to process what they had just heard. Their parents were equally shocked. "You're saying our daughters may have been switched with these other girls?" their mother asked, tears welling up in her eyes. Michael responded calmly, "We can't be certain yet. We need to find these other girls to confirm." Using the records as a starting point, Michael began tracking down the other family. After numerous calls and searches, he finally got in touch with the parents of Kayla and Tasha, the other twins. Although puzzled by the situation, they agreed to meet. The meeting took place at the hospital where it all began. When Zoe and Mia saw Kayla and Tasha for the first time, something inexplicable happened. There was an instant connection, as if a missing piece of their lives had finally been found. Michael looked at the two families and suggested, "The only way to be sure is to conduct a DNA test with all of you." Both families agreed. The test was conducted that same day, and as they waited for the results, the silence was almost unbearable. The sisters exchanged glances, trying to make sense of what this would mean for their lives. When the results arrived, the truth was finally revealed. Zoe was the biological sister of Kayla, and Mia was the biological sister of Tasha. The revelation left everyone in shock. Tears flowed, and questions arose. How did this happen? How had no one noticed before? And what does this mean for the future? Michael, however, was determined to dig deeper. "This doesn't end here. We need to hold the hospital accountable. Someone made a serious mistake, and you deserve answers." With that, the investigation continued, but now the families were united in their search for the truth. They knew that as painful as it was, the truth was the only way to find some form of closure. After confirming that Zoe and Mia were not biological sisters and that they were, in fact, part of 2 different sets of twins, the investigation took a new direction. Michael was determined to uncover how such a grave error could have occurred at the hospital. Armed with the DNA results, he knew the next step was to identify who was responsible. The 2 families, Zoe and Mia's and Kayla and Tasha's, decided to meet again. The reunion was filled with emotions. There was a mix of joy at finally understanding part of the truth, but also sadness for everything they had missed. Still, the girls showed incredible maturity. Zoe was the first to speak. "No matter what the tests say, Mia is my sister, and I'll always love her as such." Mia held Zoe's hand and smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "And you'll always be my sister. But I also want to get to know Kayla and Tasha. I want to understand who I really am." On the other side of the room, Kayla and Tasha were equally confused and emotional. "This feels so strange," Kayla said. "But somehow, I feel like I already know you." Michael looked at the girls and their families and said calmly, "The only way to resolve this is to understand exactly what happened at the hospital. We can't change the past, but we can seek justice." With this declaration, he continued his investigation. Michael returned to St. Mary's Hospital, but encountered more obstacles. The administrators were clearly trying to hide something. When he asked to interview the staff who had worked there the year the girls were born, many refused to talk, claiming they didn't remember anything. But Michael persisted. He eventually found a retired nurse willing to speak. "I'm not proud to say this, but that hospital was a mess back then," she said, her tone serious. "We were understaffed, and there were so many babies being born at the same time. I always suspected something went wrong, but no one ever wanted to listen." Michael took detailed notes and asked, "Do you think the switch was accidental or intentional?" The nurse sighed. "I can't say for sure, but there was one person, a nurse, who always seemed to have something against African American families. I don't know what she did, but I knew she shouldn't have been near the babies." This revelation made Michael deeply suspicious. He began tracking down this specific nurse, only to discover she had disappeared years ago without leaving any trace. Undeterred, he continued digging and uncovered documents that revealed severe administrative failures at the hospital. Not only were records confusing, but there were also instances where baby names appeared to have been altered. When Michael presented these findings to the two families, the room was filled with shock. "So, the hospital knew something was wrong and just ignored it?" Mia's father asked angrily. "It appears so," Michael replied. "But that's not all. There's evidence that this nurse may have intentionally swapped the babies." The room fell silent. The mothers began crying, unable to comprehend how someone could do something so cruel. Zoe, Mia, Kayla, and Tasha exchanged glances, trying to process what this meant for them. "So, if this was intentional, was it out of hatred?" Kayla asked. Michael nodded solemnly. "It's possible, but we need more evidence to be certain." The following days were filled with further investigations. Michael assembled a team of lawyers and investigators to compile as much evidence as possible against the hospital. Meanwhile, the families decided that regardless of what happened, they would stay connected. They knew they were stronger together. Finally, Michael received an important breakthrough. An anonymous source provided documents confirming that the baby switch was no accident. It was a deliberate act by the nurse in question. Michael called both families together to share the discovery. "We have proof that this nurse had a history of discriminatory behavior and, in several cases, deliberately swapped African American babies to cause confusion and suffering." The mothers were devastated, but Michael reassured them. "This won't undo what happened, but we can ensure the hospital and everyone responsible are held accountable." Zoe, Mia, Kayla, and Tasha decided not to let the hatred of one person define them. "We are more than what she tried to do," Zoe said, holding all their hands. "And we'll overcome this together." While the truth was finally coming to light, the fight for justice had just begun. The families knew they needed to be strong to face what lay ahead. With sufficient evidence gathered, Michael brought the case to court. A subpoena was issued to St. Mary's Hospital, requiring administrators to provide all relevant information and appear at a hearing. However, what the families discovered during the trial would be even more shocking than they could have imagined. On the day of the trial, Zoe, Mia, Kayla, Tasha, and their families were anxious. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, lawyers, and even other families suspecting baby switches attended. The case had garnered significant media attention, and everyone wanted to understand how such a heinous act could have occurred. Michael began presenting the evidence. He detailed how the hospital's records showed glaring failures, such as misspelled names, incorrect birth dates, and even swapped identification tags for babies. "These failures demonstrate gross negligence on the hospital's part," Michael declared. "But that's not all. We have evidence that some of these switches were intentional." The room fell silent. The judge asked Michael to elaborate. Michael revealed a revelation no one expected. "We discovered that a nurse working at the hospital at the time had a history of discriminatory behavior," Michael said, presenting documents and witness statements. "She deliberately swapped African American babies on multiple occasions, causing confusion and pain for families." The courtroom was horrified. The mothers cried openly, and the fathers looked incredulous. How could someone commit such a cruel act? The judge ordered that the nurse, who had recently been located, be brought in to testify. When the woman entered the courtroom, the atmosphere grew heavy. She was a middle-aged woman with a cold demeanor and an arrogant posture. She showed no remorse. When questioned by the judge, she began to speak. Yes, I did it, she admitted without hesitation. I swapped the babies because I wanted to. I didn't think they deserved to be with the families they had. Her confession felt like a punch to the gut for everyone in the room. The audience murmured angrily, and some even shouted in protest. Mia's mother covered her face with her hands, while Zoe's father clenched his fists in rage. The nurse continued with a sinister smile. And you know what's worse? It took you 18 years to figure it out. You're all so stupid. The judge immediately ordered her removal from the courtroom for inappropriate behavior. The audience was furious. The families couldn't believe someone could be so cruel. The girls, meanwhile, were in shock. Zoe held Mia's hand tightly. Kayla and Tasha embraced each other, trying to process what they had just heard. Michael, however, remained calm. He knew this was a crucial step in ensuring justice was served. Your actions have caused pain and suffering to countless families, he said, looking directly at the nurse. And you will be held accountable. The following days were filled with intense emotions. The nurse was convicted for her actions, and St. Mary's Hospital was held responsible for allowing such negligence. The families received a public apology and compensation to help them cope with the consequences. But for Zoe, Mia, Kayla, and Tasha, the greatest victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in finding strength in each other. We may have started as strangers, Mia said, looking at her new sisters. But now we're more than that. We're part of each other. And so, as justice was served and the hospital was forced to implement new practices, the girls and their families began a new chapter in their lives. It wasn't the one they had planned or expected, but it was the truth. Together, they knew they could face anything. With the case closed, life began adjusting to a new reality for Zoe, Mia, Kayla, and Tasha. Discovering that their lives had been altered by such a terrible mistake was difficult, but they were determined to move forward together. The Anderson and Ames families decided that what mattered most was what they would do from that point on. Despite the pain and confusion, they chose to turn the tragedy into something positive. Their first step was to come together and openly discuss how to move forward. We are a family, Zoe and Mia's mother said firmly. That doesn't change. What matters is the love we've built, not what's in our DNA. Kayla and Tasha agreed, but acknowledged that they also had many questions about their origins. So, the families decided to do something special. They organized a large gathering where everyone could share stories, photos, and memories. They wanted to ensure that none of the girls felt left out or excluded. During the reunion, Zoe showed Mia a scrapbook they had created over the years. Do you remember this? Zoe asked, pointing to a picture of them on their first day of school. Mia smiled, tears in her eyes. Of course I do. You held my hand the entire way to school because I was scared. I'll always hold your hand, Mia, Zoe replied. Across the room, Kayla and Tasha were having their first deep conversation with their biological parents. Kayla asked, So, where did I get my eyes from? I've always been told they're unique. Her biological mother smiled. Your eyes come from your grandfather. He had the same strong, bright gaze. You inherited it from him. These small connections helped the girls feel more complete. They began to understand that, despite the complications, there was beauty in discovering their life stories and origins. The journey wasn't easy. There were moments when the families needed time to process everything. Zoe and Mia still saw each other as sisters, but began building bonds with Kayla and Tasha. Similarly, Kayla and Tasha were grateful to meet their biological sisters, but never forgot the love of the parents who raised them. Over time, the families came to an important realization. What defines a family isn't just blood but love, care, and shared moments. One evening, while the four girls were gathered for a picnic, Mia looked at the others and said, I think we're proof that family is more than what's on paper or in DNA. We're sisters because we choose to be. Zoe smiled. And we're lucky. We didn't just gain one family, we gained two. Kayla laughed. Does that mean we get double the birthday presents now? They all burst into laughter, feeling that, despite everything, they were beginning to find peace. Meanwhile, their case inspired significant changes in the healthcare system. Authorities mandated new protocols to ensure that such incidents would never happen again. Other parents who suspected baby swaps began investigations, bringing more stories to light and helping other families uncover the truth. In the end, Zoe, Mia, Kayla, and Tasha discovered that love was the force that held them together. No matter what the past revealed, they knew who they were: sisters, friends, and, most importantly, a family. With stronger hearts and deeper connections, they continued to write their own story, a story that began with a mistake but was transformed into a legacy of love and unity.